right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Happy World Ocean Week to all the classrooms out there. It has been just an awesome week of live events in partnership with the Explorers Club. In fact, I'm in the map room on the top level of the headquarters in New York. We've been broadcasting from here all week long. We've been connecting with scientists and explorers and researchers and documentary filmmakers, artists and conservationists, all sharing their stories of exploration, their stories of science, their stories of everything they're doing to try and protect our ocean, which is so important to the survival of our planet. Today is the last day. If you visit exploringbytheseat.com/Ocean Week, you can find all the past events if you want to tune into recordings. You can also register for the final events coming up today. So today is our Shark Day. We just spent some time with Andrea Marshall in Albania, and he talked about some of the shark research he does there in the Mediterranean. And before we meet our guest for today, I'll remind everybody at 1 p.m. Eastern, we're going live with the Sea Turtle Hospital in the Florida Keys. So that should be a really fun way to kind of wrap up the week. But now we're heading to Mozambique. We have Dr. Andrea Marshall joining us. She was the first to complete a PhD on manta rays. She stayed on in Mozambique to spearhead the conservation efforts of these animals along the remote coastline, where she co-founded the Marine Megafauna Foundation, an organization dedicated to saving our ocean giants from extinction. As a conservation biologist and the principal researcher at Marine Megafauna Foundation, her team focuses on questions related to the effective management and conservation of threatened marine animals. Andrea is a National Geographic explorer, and her discovery of a new giant species of manta ray in 2009 was one of the largest new species to be described in the last few decades. So here we go. Let's bring Andrea in with us. Hey, Andrea, how are you doing?
Fine. Thanks very much for having me, Joe.
Of course. It's always great to see you. Always great to have you live with us. I'm going to let you take over for a little bit. We're going to have a little Kahoot quiz with the classrooms afterwards. I'm going to prepare it in the background, and then we're going to let them take over some Q&A action. So the floor is yours for a bit.
Thanks so much, and thanks for that really lovely introduction. I don't even have to say where I'm from or what organization I work for. So thanks very much for that. And I will just start by sharing the fact that I am an absolute ray fanatic. And I never thought that would be the case because I grew up absolutely obsessed with sharks. And to be fair, I still love them very much. But once I started exploring this particular group, I got really fascinated because the diversity in the ray group is probably even more than we see in sharks. And so it's a group though that's not as studied as sharks. And I think a lot of people are alarmed to find that the rays are actually in more jeopardy than sharks are. There's more threatened species of rays these days than sharks even. And of course that's really terrible, but it's also a call to action for researchers who, want to help the ocean, because we really need these, this is an understudied group and we really need more researchers out there studying these guys. So I've gotten really obsessed over the years. There's so many different ray species. They're so cool. It just, from this little image right here, you can see some of the rays have saws on their face, and some of them can, put out, electric charges. They come in different sort of shapes and sizes and colors. Some of them kind of fly like birds through the water column. Other ones bury in the sand, and a lot of them have the ability to sting you or defend themselves with a stinger. They're just really cool animals. And so I'd like to talk to you today about obviously my favorite ray out there, which is the manta, and share a little bit about my life story, how I got involved in manta research, and what my goals are going forward with mantas. So if you do not know, mantas are the king of the ray group. They're the largest of any of the living rays, and we measure them in terms of disc width. So that's from one side of their fins to the other, and they can get up to, I've seen them about 7 meters. I mean, historically, people say that they got up to 8 meters, but even 7 meters at about 21 feet is really, really large. When they swim over your head, or swim by you. I mean, they're just that they can just dwarf you. It's amazing. And it's an amazing feeling to work on an animal this size. I had just taken a little tissue sample from this one, and I was helping that animal to readjust after I took a little sample. But you can just see that an enormous size of these rays compared to a human diver. So it's pretty awesome to be working with an animal that's this large. The thing about mantas and that sets them apart from a lot of other rays is that they are what we call pelagic, meaning that they swim in the open ocean primarily. In fact, they never stop swimming. So a lot of the rays spend a lot of time sitting on the ground or sitting on the sea floor. But manta rays are always in motion, so they never ever stop swimming. And they can live 40, 50 years. So they're constantly in motion that whole time, which is pretty extraordinary. Like their sort of cousins, the sharks, rays and mantas have cartilaginous skeletons. So if you look at this manta from the top down and then from the inside out, this is what its skeleton looks like, but it's made up entirely of cartilage, which is the same stuff that's in your nose or in your ears. If you feel it, it's soft. And that's actually what makes this whole group of sharks and rays so flexible and wonderful is this cartilage. It gives them this really great range of motion. The thing about sharks is that, a lot of people like them or dislike them because they have really big teeth. And a lot of people aren't really sure if rays have teeth. A lot of rays do have teeth. Most of them are used for crushing or grinding. People are really surprised to learn that mantas have teeth because they have these giant gaping mouths, but no one really sees any teeth in there. But they do. They have teeth. And they exist in what's called a tooth band that stretches from one side of the lower jaw to the other. And if you were to blow that tooth band up with pretty high level photography, you'll see all these tiny little embedded teeth that are only like 1 millimeter or 2 in size. They're really, really small, but they can have up to 4,000 teeth in that lower jaw. And even though you can barely see them, they're quite sticky and rough if you rub against them. So it almost acts like Velcro. And I'll maybe talk a little bit later about why they have teeth, but they definitely don't use them for feeding, and they definitely can't hurt you. Speaking of not being able to hurt you, one of the other things that kind of sets mantas apart from many of the other rays in general, because a lot of rays are stingrays, is that mantas don't have a stinging barb. So even though they're related to the stingrays and they actually came from stingrays and evolved from stingrays at one stage, they no longer have one of those big spines on their tails. So this is the small-eyed stingray. This is one of the world's largest marine stingrays, and one of my volunteers swimming next to it just to show you the scale. And if you look at the base of its tail, you'll see actually a little point, maybe about halfway, maybe a third of the way up the tail, and that's actually its stinging barb. So mantas don't have those. If you look at the base of a manta's tail, which we're looking right down on one right now, they have a cartilage mass where a stinger used to sit, but over time it reduced and reduced to the point where they don't even have one anymore. So that made my mom feel a lot better that I was studying these, big 20 foot plus animals, but they weren't able to sting me. So I made her be able to sleep better at night. I think one of the other really kind of things that jumps out at you when you see a manta, when you think about it being a ray and you see it, is that it's shaped really differently than a lot of the other rays. Instead of being like having a round shape to it, it has these really long elongated pectoral fins that almost act like wings. That's what it's like underwater to watch them swim. They beat them just like a bird would underwater. And so they have these enormous pectoral fins, and they also have an enormous mouth at the front of their body. And most rays, they have mouths positioned underneath their body. So manta rays have evolved these mouths that kind of sit, in the front of their face. And the reason that their whole body plan has changed because they themselves have changed their environment over time. So instead of being like a normal ray sitting around on the sand or in the reefs, manta rays, as I said before, are pelagic. So they swim around the ocean. And they migrate long distances, and they, needed to be able to swim far because they are looking for plankton. That's what they eat with those enormous mouths. And you can see those big cavernous mouths there. I also wanted to just point out that they find their food by actually sniffing it out, smelling it, and you can actually see their version of a nose circled with those yellow circles right there. And when they find their food, they basically take huge swallows of it through that ginormous cavernous mouth. Just note also in the very back of that throat, there's like a black hole. That's the opening to their esophagus. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about what you're seeing as well just in a second. So mantas can feed, they can actually intake about 240 gallons per minute. That's a lot of water. It's about what you would find in an average size hot tub per minute. So that's a lot of water that they can push through that mouth, and they're basically filtering out all of those little particles that you're seeing, most of which are little tiny organisms, little tiny animals that are living in the water column, or things like fish eggs. And that's what mantas feed on. So they're planktivorous, similar to things like whale sharks or even the great whales. A lot of them are planktivorous. And manta rays can eat a whole suite of different types of plankton. How do they eat it though? They're able to basically filter it out of the water, and they use, so going back to that picture again, they use these filtering pads in their mouth. So all of those little structures that you see in their mouth are basically filtering pads. And they're able to bring the water into their mouth. Then the water exits through those filtering pads, and then all of those tiny particles get trapped, and they're able to swallow them. So it's a pretty cool system that they have, and they're very efficient feeders, obviously. And they can eat about, the aquariums say that they can eat between 10 and 15% of their body weight a week. So they definitely are good at finding and being able to extract that plankton from the water column. So this is what a lot of the mantas feed on here in Mozambique, where I live. They're targeting things like fish eggs, things that are really nutritious. But unfortunately, as filter feeders, one of the problems about being a filter feeder these days is that if you're wandering around at the surface filtering water, you happen to also be filtering a lot of plastic these days. And so that is something that we're also investigating too. As filter feeders, because they're designed to filter their food, what are going to be the impacts of microplastics and larger plastics in our ocean these days? One of the other really standout features of mantas, and this is definitely one of my favorite facts about them, and the thing that draws me to them as a study species, is the fact that this group has the largest brain of any of the marine fish. So mantas and mobulas all have really large brain to body ratios, and we've explored a little bit about why that would be the case. And I think we've settled largely on the fact that the expansion of their brain size probably has a lot to do with the fact that they're very social. So unlike some rays and sharks that spend a lot of time by themselves, manta rays seem to spend quite a lot of time with others. And they're even able to differentiate, it seems, between each other. And they seem to even spend time with very specific individuals in the places that they live. So we're learning more about their social networks, and if they do have friends or acquaintances, and why they would want to spend more time with certain individuals than others. It's a fascinating field, and I'm really excited to be helping some students to explore that. But that's probably why they have such a large brain. And it's not just for socializing with each other. It seems that they also can potentially socialize with other intelligent animals underwater, like us. And this is one of the things that I love about mantas, is that they're so curious. It's a great animal to study because you don't feel so guilty as a biologist. You don't feel like you're having to sneak up on the animals and trouble them to do research. They come to you. They want to engage you. They're definitely not afraid. And I could even say that some of the times they even seem to want to play with you. So it's a great animal to study because they're so willing to be studied. And they're really accepting of any of the things that we try and do on them, which is really great as a researcher. So I could have started with this fact, but and I think Joe alluded to it in his introduction. There are 2 different species of mantas. In fact, there are really 3. Just the third one hasn't necessarily been described yet. But I did describe a second species of manta in 2009, the giant oceanic manta, and that joined us. It joined a smaller reef manta. I don't know where that picture is, but so there are 2 different species of mantas out there. In fact, the top manta on the right-hand side is a reef manta. Maybe it's in the next slide. Yeah. Okay. So there's the reef manta, and that's the sort of the smaller cousin of the giant manta. I also wanted to point out that in addition to having 2 different species of mantas, and in actual fact, like I said, there's 3. There's also 2 different really distinct color types other than the normal color type to mantas. So they have a dark colored manta called a black manta, where most of the animal is black, except for usually like a small blaze of white on its underside. And there's also something that we call a white manta. And this manta just has a reduction of pigment. So it kind of looks very ghostly because a lot of its pigment just doesn't show. I always find this really great because I kind of compare it to humans a little bit, in that, we come in different colors and shades, and so do mantas. It doesn't make them any different. It just is kind of a different color form. And I think it's really neat. So a lot of people want to know why mantas are so threatened and why I've spent my life studying them. One of the reasons is that, their population sizes are not usually very large. And one of the other things that causes issue for them is that they don't have very many babies over the course of their life. So you're looking at a pregnant female right now. You can see her huge distended belly. They kind of look like flying saucers when you see them when they're pregnant. They have this huge bulge on their belly and this massive bulge on their back, and then they're really flat in the middle. Sometimes I see these mantas swimming and I can't even believe they're able to swim as fast as they are. They just look so uncomfortably big. But inside that belly is typically a single offspring. Every once in a while they can have twins, but most of the time, like us, they give birth to a single very large offspring. So she comes out at 1.5 meters, right? So that's really quite small. We're not sure where they're born really, because no one's ever seen a birth in the wild. This unfortunately was a female that had been caught by a fisherman, but you can see her having her baby here, and you can see kind of the size of it when it comes out, and also how it's wrapped inside of her. They're kind of wrapped like little burritos, or little wraps, with their wings folded up over their dorsal surfaces, so that they can come out. They do not have any parental care. So when these little babies come out, they stretch their wings out, give them a couple of flaps, and basically they're ready to go. They don't need any support from their parents. The parents don't end up taking care of them at all. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of predators out there that might want to snack on them. So a lot of times baby mantas spend the first many years in what we call nursery habitats. And we're still learning a lot about these nursery habitats, where they are, and what the common features are of these nursery habitats. But what we found is they're oftentimes kind of inshore, quiet, safe environments. They can be like a lagoon, for instance, or it can be coastal waters around an island where you might not find very many predators. And the mantas seem to spend many years in these locations, getting a little bit larger, so that they have a way to defend themselves. Because remember, they don't really have teeth to speak of, and they don't have a stinging spine. So you definitely want to use your size to your advantage if you don't have any other ways to defend yourself. So they do spend a bit of time in these nursery habitats before they go off into the big blue yonder and join the adult populations. Even as adults, there are concerns and issues with predation. And as you're seeing in some of these pictures, sharks do tend to like to snack on them. They probably don't take adult mantas down, like in terms of killing them. They do what I would call snacking. So they take bites of mantas, and mantas are so fast that they usually, as soon as they realize a predator has caught on to them and has taken a little nibble, they're able to speed away pretty quick. And then luckily for mantas, they are quite clever, and they have learned over time to come to inshore reefs like this one right here, oftentimes very colorful and full of fish. And they are soliciting services from little reef fish. And what I mean by that is that they're looking to be cleaned. So they come to these reefs and they hover almost motionless. It's amazing to watch just how mantas are able to stop swimming. They don't, if they stop swimming entirely, they would sink. So they kind of use the current and trying to lift themselves up a little bit, but try not to swim too fast so that the little fish can keep up with them. And those fish come in and they clean different parts of their bodies. And what I found really interesting when I've done studies on them before is the different fish usually clean different parts of the animal and different things on the animal. Some of them are picking off parasites. Some of them are scraping algal buildup off. Some of them are getting into the gill slits themselves. And some of them specialize in the bite marks, and they help those wounds heal over time. So it's kind of, a lot of people consider it like going to a car wash or a beauty salon, every day as they duck into these cleaning stations. But it's probably more like going to a hospital every day and just getting a little bit of a checkup. So I have spent the last 20 years of my life living in this beautiful place. It's called the Bazaruto Archipelago of the Inhambane Seascape, which is in southern Mozambique. It's where I'm sitting right now. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about, this place and kind of what our mission is here. So as I said, I've spent the last 20 years here, and the reason that I've spent so much time along this coastline is because it's full of really incredible marine megafauna, which is why I started an organization called the Marine Megafauna Foundation. And not only are these animals awesome, and it's a great privilege to be able to spend time with them every day, but a lot of them are incredibly threatened. So many of them are endangered or critically endangered, and it's really not that common to find so many rare and iconic and also endangered species living in one place together. So this is a pretty special part of the world, and a lot of people aren't even aware that Africa has such amazing seascapes. And so it's a part of my duty as well to tell everyone about African oceans and tell them how wonderful some of these areas are. This area in particular has the largest identified population of reef mantas in all of Africa. It also has the largest identified population of giant mantas in all of Africa. And I have spent a lot of time here off this coastline studying them. As Joe mentioned, I did my PhD here, which was the very first PhD on mantas. But we also have many other researchers here working underneath me that are studying this population now too. So there's a lot of great information coming out about the manta population here. It's considered to be one of the best studied populations of mantas in the world now, for sure. Obviously, I've formed a relationship with these mantas. I know most of them by name, and you can actually recognize mantas for those of you who doubt me. Each manta has a different collection of spot patterns on its underside that are unique and that don't change over time. So you really can differentiate between one individual and another one. I obviously got really attached to this population and then got really depressed when I started to see that the population was declining pretty quickly. I quickly realized that that was a result of many different threats, but mainly fishing. And sadly was to learn that there was a trade for manta body parts similar to the shark fin trade that I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about. Where people are actually targeting these animals, taking some of their body parts out, like those gill plates I was telling you about that they strain the plankton through, and they're kind of taking them to Asia and selling them in the markets there. And so as a result, manta populations started to crash. Our manta populations have experienced over a 95% decline in the areas that we're working, which is one of the largest declines on record in the world. And we got really upset about that and spent a lot of time trying to get them listed globally as protected under several different conservation appendices, but then also spent many years in Mozambique getting them protected here in the country, which we were able to do in 2020. So we're very excited that mantas are protected in the country, but we recognize as well that we need to protect their habitat, not just list them on a protected species list. We really need to protect their primary habitat in the country. So we've spent many years now trying to learn more about what the mantas do off this coastline, where their favorite spots are, what their home range is, what the area is that I need to try and protect. So we do a lot of tagging. You can see me putting on a small tag on this animal right here. We do a lot of tagging. We do a lot of spying on them. We have a lot of different types of camera traps that we put out on different reefs, trying to learn more about how mantas use different habitats, where they travel to, and as I said before, what the most important habitat is to protect. We actually have scientists studying all the different species that I mentioned before. So a lot of the different sharks and wedgefish and turtles and marine mammals. And there's a lot of scientists out here in Mozambique now working for the Marine Megafauna Foundation, kind of asking those same questions of all of the different megafauna that live here. And we've been really lucky over the last 20 years to be able to determine that the most important area to protect is this red area along the coast. It's a pretty sizable area, maybe about 350 kilometers. I don't know what that is in miles, but it is pretty a sizable area. And so far, only the two tiny checkered boxes in the graph here are protected, the Baton Rouge Archipelago National Park and the Vilunculos Wildlife Sanctuary. But we're working on a third protected area to the south of those that will probably increase the protected area footprint by about 50%. So that's a really good start in building a seascape of protection. And Sylvia Earle and her incredible Mission Blue team and I announced the red spot as a hope spot earlier this year in January. And my team and I and my family will work probably for the rest of our lives with our goal of trying to figure out how to increase that protected area along the coastline to cover the entire red area one day. So that's basically my life is like figured out. That's what I got to do for the rest of my life. But I'm really excited that I have a target, and I'm really excited that we're seeing, you know, slow progress towards that goal. It's very, very exciting to be involved in conservation and know that what you do every day and what your team does every day is really making a difference. So if you'd like to follow me more, you can definitely do that at Queen of Mantas, or also my organization at the Marine Megafauna, or just marinemegafauna.org on most of the Marine Megafauna, on most of the social media sites. But I'd really love to answer any questions that you have about mantas in general, or just answer any questions about what it's like to be a marine biologist, or how to get there, or, you know, what it's like to live in the fields and do this work every day. But thanks for your attention, and I hope you guys had a really amazing Ocean Week.
All right, Andrea, thank you so much for that awesome presentation. I mean, those images just never get old. They're such beautiful, amazing marine sea creatures, and the work you're doing protecting the coastline is awesome. You've truly turned your passion into your career, and I imagine that every day doesn't always feel like work, which is a pretty good thing.
It is a good thing.
All right, we are going to take a little detour, and we're going to play a little Kahoot quiz together.
Cool.
See what kind of manta knowledge our classrooms picked up. So kahoot.it is the link. If you have one-to-one technology at your seat, you can join that way. Or if not, your teacher could put it up on the board. You could shout out your answers to him or her. I'm going to share my screen and bring up the PIN number for you. So here we go. And our PIN number for today is 1647384. You could also, if you have an individual device, scan that QR code. That'll bring you right in. So we'll give a few moments here for some students, some classrooms, groups to start joining us. There will be 5 questions this time around, a mixture of multiple choice and true and false.
It's like popcorn.
Yeah. You've got 20 seconds to answer those questions. The right answer is worth points. The right answer really quickly is worth even more. But if you put in the wrong answer and do it really, really fast, well, we got nothing for you. You got to get that answer in, the right answer as quickly as you can. I see lots of students joining us. We've got names like the epic emu, the smooth bee, the wise wolf. Very cool. Space opossum. Good stuff. We'll give it another moment here because names are still coming in. Once it starts to trickle down a little bit more, we will take things live.
Great names.
It is auto-generated because, you know, just to be on the safe side.
Still, great names.
We picked animals because thought it fit nicely. The nimble
Epic
squid.
emu.
There's a nice ocean
Stellar
one.
Stellar pelican.
All right. I think it's time. Let's take this live. 3-second countdown. Remember, you've got 20 seconds. Get that answer in nice and quick. Here we go. True or false to warm us up. There's more threatened species of rays than sharks. What did we learn today? Is that true or is that false? There we go. Good job, crew. Most went with true. Let's see what that did to our leaderboard. The brave swan is holding down that. Oh, no, a tie with the brave swan and the elated one. Let's see what happens. Let's shake this up a little more with the multiple choice question. So mantas are pelagic, meaning They spend most of their time near the coast, in open water, near mangroves, or in cold water. We've got our answers coming in. Andrea, I know I hear sometimes people refer to the rays as the flat sharks. Where are you on that? How do you feel about that?
It's true. I mean, I think that helps people understand them. I mean, obviously, most sharks are very cylindrical in shape. Not all of them. But it is kind of like a general theme for sure.
Yeah. All right. So in open water, good job, crew. I think it's amazing. They never stop moving their entire lives as they cruise through our planet's ocean. Sue, what did that do to our board? The Arctic tiger has swiped in and taken that top spot. We have a true and false on deck. Mantas can live to be about 20 years old. Let's see who was on the ball. I mean, that seems like a reasonable answer to me. Let's see what happens. All right. Oh, we did trick some of the students out there. We know that's false. About 40 to 50 years is about what a manta can live to. And Andrea, I'm guessing that a lot of that data is probably based on tagging and tracking over time, or can you age a manta maybe after it dies?
It's actually, we tried to age a manta. Like, you can age sharks by taking out parts of the vertebral column and like actually taking those vertebrae and sectioning them, and you can count the growth rings on a shark, similar to how you can count the rings of a tree. But unfortunately with mantas, that doesn't work. So we resorted to citizen science, really, which is so great. Being able to rely on people that took pictures of mantas many, many years ago that are still in the same populations that are being studied today. And we were able to get some of these longevity records by, people, there being mature mantas even, 30, 40 years ago that are still being recited now. So it's tedious work, but that's our best kind of guess at the moment.
All right. Our leaderboard, the Arctic tigers holding on. Here we go. Mantas feed on seagrass, crabs, plankton, or fish. Got a nice manta train going on in this picture.
I know. How did you find all these things so fast?
The nice thing about Kahoot is they have a nice collection of free use images you can find really quickly.
Cool.
All right. So we know that's plankton. Now that could consist of little tiny fish larvae, crab larvae, like that. But they like that nice small stuff that they can filter. Very cool. Arctic tiger might be able to hold on. Here we go. Last question, true and false. Mantas have a stinger, just like other ray species.
What do we get when we're the winner?
You get the glory of finishing top
Glory's
3
good.
podium. I mean, you can brag about that all week. Brag about that all weekend.
Bragging rights is always good.
So we're right. That is false. They no longer have that stinger. Our podium, let's see what shakes down here. In third place, we have the agile hen. In second place, we've got the decisive otter.
Nice.
And holding down that top spot, ooh, the smooth bee unseats the Arctic tiger. Moment. Very, very cool. All right,
amazing.
Let's switch gears. Let's go back to Q&A action. Thanks for playing along, everybody. Let's start off in Farmington, not New Jersey, Missouri. A summer school crew with us. How are we doing, Farmington?
We're super excited because we got first place, but okay.
Oh, good job.
Julia has a question. So, if we all in the predators.
Can we get that a little closer? I missed that. Nice and loud.
If they don't have a stinger, how do they protect themselves against predators?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And so, as I said before, I think the strategy, there's a couple of strategies. One, I don't know if you remember to me saying that they're really born at a large size. So I think that the mother helps the offspring by putting a lot of investment of energy into growing a really large pup, you know, before they're even born. So I think that gives them a little bit of an advantage when they come out, that at least they're, you know, bigger than a bite size for most animals. I mean, some of the bigger sharks, sure. And then, as I said before, they spend many years hiding in nursery habitats, trying to, I think, increase their odds. And then they are they have incredible burst speed. So one of the things about mantas is that they have like white muscle, but that's laced with red muscle through them. So they have this really oxygenated muscle that gives them this amazing burst speed ability. So, you know, I've always been really surprised when I've seen sharks try and go after mantas, because most of the time they're able to just shoot away, and the sharks that give chase, they just can't keep up. So what sharks really do in order to increase their odds is they wait for mantas, usually at cleaning stations where they're concentrating on something else and they're not really looking, and they sneak up on them, and that's where they get the advantage. But yeah, mantas are pretty fast.
All right, thanks, Missouri. Great question to kick things off. Let's go back to our camera crews, and let's go to Canada this time. In Milton, we have some fourth graders hanging out. Let's bring them in. Looks like maybe a virtual crew. How are we doing, Miss Murphy?
Oh, we're doing great. Yeah, we're a virtual crew all over Halton, actually. We're really excited to be on YouTube and play Kahoot. We had some really strong performances there, so
Awesome.
thank you.
Good stuff.
We have a few questions, so maybe I'll pick two here. How long have you been helping mantas? Did you
Well,
hear?
I've actually been studying manta rays like in a professional sense. Yeah, in a professional sense for 20 years now. That's when I really kind of started my PhD and my work here in Mozambique. And of course, now I work globally on them. But I think I saw my first manta ray when I was about 17 years old, and I fell in love with it immediately. And I've always had huge effect for the animal, and, you know, spent extra time kind of just studying it as a naturalist before I began my career.
Really awesome. Do you have time for one more?
Sure.
Awesome. Someone wanted to know, what's the oldest living manta that you know of?
I think the oldest living manta is probably, I think in its like late 30s, I think is the oldest one at the moment. And I believe it's in Australia. And so, you know, and based on its size and condition and stuff, it doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon, which is kind of where we started to get the 40 to 50 year kind of range for the longevity of the species.
All right, thanks, Miss Murphy's crew. Let's grab a question off YouTube, and then we'll bring up some of our camera classrooms again. We've got a couple more waiting for their turn. So, all right. Okay, so here's a question from Miss McTiernan's class. They're hanging out with us virtually. And this is Dexter. Dexter's wondering if mantas can have more than one, I think, did you call them pups? Was that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can they have more than one pup at a time?
Yes. So I have seen mantas that have given birth to twins. You know, when I say I've actually not seen the birth, because no one has ever seen a manta ray give birth in the wild. But unfortunately, because I live in a place where people fish mantas, we've had, you know, unfortunate cases of mantas coming onto the beach, and we've lost actually not just the manta, but 2 offspring inside. So I know they're capable of it, but we've tracked many pregnant females over time, and it looks that most of the time, by far the majority of the time, it's just a single offspring. I don't know how they would fit 2 in there, but they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, New York. Miss Cottrell's 5th graders are hanging out with us. How are we doing, New York?
So if you already answered the question, I'm sorry, I just came in a little late. But I was wondering, since mantas are always in motion, do they ever sleep?
I didn't get that, Joe.
She was wondering, because they're always in motion, how do they sleep? Do they ever sleep?
That's a great question. And so, you know, what I have to say is we don't know. And, you know, I think studying things in the ocean is always really difficult. And a lot of times we look to things like the people who are researching cetaceans. A lot of times people started studying things like dolphins and whales way before they started studying other types of fish. What we do know about some things in the ocean is that they're able to like turn off parts of their brain at a time, or rest to go into resting periods I don't think, I think that from our perspective, we assume that all animals need to sleep exactly the way that we do. But as it turns out, animals, different types of animals, lots of different types of animals require different types of sleep. There are some things that hibernate, like bears, for ages, which I don't think I could do. I think I'd get a sore back if I tried that. And other animals that require very, very little sleep. I think every animal is different. And I don't know how mantas really rest their brains. And they must have to do a lot of resting because they have a really big brain. But so far, we haven't been able to figure that one out.
All right. That's what I love about the ocean and ocean careers is there's so much that we need to figure out. There's so much marine biologists we need, but many other fields you can get into that still bring you into ocean exploration. So many questions to answer. And I think one thing we've learned this week is scientists go out with some questions, but they come back with even more questions. And I think that's just the nature of science and research.
Job security. Don't want to answer all the questions at once.
Exactly. All right, Mr. Hancock's crew. They are joining us today, some 4th and 5th graders from Georgetown. Let's bring them in. Hey, Mr. Hancock.
How's it going? How's everyone doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Thanks. Sorry we were late to get in, but we were curious about sleep as well. But we're curious, have you ever formed relationships with manta rays? Like, would they recognize certain people, certain explorers underwater? Would they recognize you? What'd you say?
That's a really difficult question to answer. I have a lot of people who think, based on the way that manta rays behave around me, that they're convinced that manta rays know who I am. I would hazard to say that I think they could, because I think that we're starting to learn that they seem to be able to recognize specific, individuals of mantas. But I think more what happens is that, if you know how to behave around a manta, if you, just the same as like a dog whisperer, I think if you are, if you really know how to behave around them, they're definitely going to single you out. They're definitely going to want to engage with you more. And I think that's probably, like scientist brains, that tells me that's probably what's happening. But there are mantas that live here in Mozambique that we see quite regularly that I think over time, maybe, yeah, or maybe if they don't necessarily recognize me, they start to get used to, human beings and divers very specifically, because they're just, comfortable with us. They see us all the time.
Right, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Georgetown, Mr. Hancock's crew. Okay, we have time to squeeze in maybe 1 or 2 more questions. So if you have a burning question and you're tuning in via YouTube, use that chat sidebar. If you're in a camera classroom and you haven't had a chance for a follow-up, give me a big wave so I know to come back and we'll bring your crew in. So let's start off with New York. Go ahead, Mrs. Carl Charles crew.
How many species of manta rays are there?
Great question. So I kind of alluded to that fact. It's kind of a difficult one for me to discuss. We did discover a 2nd species in 2009, and then we really have discovered a 3rd species. I just am careful to say it because even though 10 years ago I identified that there was a 3rd species of manta, and then even now genetically it's been proven that there's a 3rd species of manta, I'm still just describing it right now. So I don't want to say there's 3 because it's not done until it's done. But yeah, there are 3 different species of mantas now.
All right. And it's not, I don't think it's as quick as a process as some classrooms think, where you just see something like, yep, there we go, new species. It can take years and years to properly describe it and, really kind of do that due diligence to make sure it is a new species and then recognized. Okay. Farmington, Missouri. Do you guys have a follow-up in our summer school crew?
I should ask you a question. Okay. Who wants to say it? No. Somebody want to read it? Okay.
What are the front flaps for?
Ooh, good question. Yeah, I don't have the longest time to be able to talk about everything, but that's really observant. So that is, again, something that's highly specialized in mantas that a lot of the other rays don't have. And those are called cephalic fins. And basically what they do is they can hold those fins at different angles, and it helps direct water into their mouth. Sometimes when they feed, they actually feed like this, and then it actually acts almost like a funnel to help funnel water into their mouth too. So they can hold it at different angles and at different directions. and it helps get direct more plankton and more water into their mouth, just making them more efficient feeders. And things like whale sharks that feed on plankton or basket sharks that feed on plankton, they don't even have those. So we imagine that manta rays are incredibly efficient at feeding. Great question.
Okay, thanks so much, summer school crew. It's been great to have you tuning in throughout the week. Andrea, let's start off with a big shout out to our classrooms. Thank you so much to the classrooms for joining us, for playing Kahoot with us, for sending in questions for us. It's always great to see you. A shout out to the classrooms in different time zones who will be joining later today or maybe even next week. And I just want to remind everybody that we've still got one more event coming up to wrap up the week. If you'd like to see a little sea turtle action, head with us to the Florida Keys at 1 p.m. Eastern to the Turtle Hospital. We'll get to learn all about different turtle species, their conservation, and then, of course, how they're rescuing and rehabilitating those sea turtles so they can release them back into the wild. Andrea, let me share a link here to the Marine Megafauna Foundation. So definitely spend some time to explore the organization and see the great work that they do, not just with the mantas, but with many megafauna species like the sea turtles and the whale sharks. And Andrea, it's always such a pleasure to steal your time, whether you're in South Africa or Mozambique or Florida, wherever we can catch you. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for all the great work you're doing to help protect our ocean.
Absolutely, and thanks for hosting such an amazing series of events this week.
All right, we've still got a few classrooms kicking around, so let's get loud. Let me bring our classrooms in. Let's get a nice big Thanks, everyone. We're going to sign off for now. Have a great rest